And good evening. I'm Devon Sanders. I'm your host, and welcome to Fantastic Forum. Figured I'd just introduce you to the guest. To my right, the incredible Ben Hatton, the invulnerable James Rambo, last name, that is his real name, and Shireen Nicole, not a real name, but that's what we're going to go with because she got warrants. Anyway. Today's topic is about unionization in comics. It's something that's been talked about. A lot of comic book talent has been like freelance for the longest time. We all have heard the stories about Bill Finger and Jack Kirby basically kind of getting, we're going to say nicely, shafted. Somebody might have put a screw to him.
Ignored.
Ignored. Matter of fact, there's even like an award called the Bill Finger Award where you basically get a finger.
Which finger?
The one that says you're number one.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. That says, hey, you got shafted, but here's an award for getting shafted. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about whether or not it's feasible to even unionize and freelance talent in the comic industry. Anybody have any thoughts, opinions?
Ben?
Why, yes, I do. Whether or not you can, I think it'd be very difficult because you're talking about a group of people who are all in different walks of life.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're like talking about people who are, some people are illustrators, some people are editors, some people are comic writers, and they all want something different. So to have like a one huge union that represents all their interests, yeah. I think is really difficult. I mean, what does Fabio Moon in Brazil care about what's going on with Peter Tomasi wherever he lives?
Yeah, no, comic creators cover a pretty wide gamut. And, you have, but even with that said, teachers' unions, there's tons of people from different walks of life, but those are more centralized, aren't they?
Right, where you have like a building where everyone's, you don't have, you have a whole teachers union, but you also have like the DC's teacher union, and they have a shared experience. And yeah, you have a shared experience of comic books. I don't know if you have like a shared experience of, the single place, like a one building or whatever.
But still, you can have boards that focus on each particular field within comics, so that there's the whole, and then there's the folks that look after a specific interest. I mean, if you look at basketball, the cats that are making $300,000 don't have the same interest as the cats that make that every minute.
Right.
So,
of course. I mean, I don't think there's a union out. I don't think when they talk about unionizing, you're worrying about Jeff Johns or Brian Michael Bendis.
That's true.
Unions never think about like the A-list. They're worried more about the guys right in the middle.
Or people who are just trying to break into the industry.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Seems like they could come up with a set of guidelines that speak to each field within comic books.
Yeah, well, see, my opinion about this whole union thing, and I just joined the union for the first time ever. And, I'm 3 months deep into the union, and $500 poor for it.
You gotta pick it.
Yeah, you do. True enough. No, but here's the thing. I'm thinking the union isn't so much sometimes about making sure that someone doesn't get screwed over or whatever. It's like with anything, it's going to get abused, but that's a whole nother discussion. It's more so that if you're Scott McDaniel, for instance, and you've been there for DC Comics, pumping it out for 10 years, and then suddenly, your tooth hurts. What do? You have to come out of pocket for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like unionization can be a good thing where Warner Brothers, which is a huge corporation, hey, maybe you can, right. Healthcare for one of your employees who's been there for 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, do you necessarily need to give them a contract? We all realize it's work for hire.
Right.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, I just think that maybe the corporation should have a little bit of responsibility for someone who's literally produced a body of work for you. If they basically, this is what it comes down to. If someone's produced a body of work for you, take care of the body.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's very true.
I don't think anyone would ever say a union is a bad idea. It's not like the workers of America are like, what's a terrible idea? Something that gives me a 401k and healthcare and like keeps me from like getting fired.
Minimum pay.
Right. But like, you know, I would worry about a union affecting people breaking in. Like that'd be my biggest concern. Because like when you're trying to get a writer's job, you have to have done something first before you can make it into the guild. Or other unions like the steam fitters or whatever, you have to be a journeyman for like 5 years.
Yeah.
And then if you're a journeyman, like you don't get as good pay or as good hours and you're like really not there yet. So I would hate like to see DC and Marvel go union and then tell some guy who's aspiring like, oh, by the way, sorry, you can only do one book from us for the next 6 months because you're not in a union yet.
I don't know if it should necessarily be a union, but rather just more corporate responsibility, like Devon was talking. You know, if you're doing a monthly book, you are a full-time employee.
Right.
And because freelance is great. I mean, speaking to somebody who's trying to become a freelance artist myself, there's some definite pros and cons. You know, you have the freedom and flexibility to work on your own schedule, you know, when you're available. But at the same time, once you finish that job, there might not be one waiting for you.
Right.
So I think it really falls down to, I don't know if necessarily a union is the best idea, but there's definitely more corporate responsibility as far as, you know, like take Scott McDaniels. Scott McDaniels got that tooth hurting.
Oh, yeah.
So dental insurance, you know, if you're doing, you know, if you're a consistent cover artist, if you do like, I don't know, 5 to 10 covers a month, then you're a full-time employee. Right. There should be like standards and practices that set saying, if this is the amount of work you're putting out for us, if you're doing like Chris Giarrusso and you're doing like a 3-page backup once every other month, then you're a part-time employee. You're not you don't qualify for the same benefits. But
a union could do that tiered. You could say like, oh, you're doing 1 book a month or 2 books a month. A union could
These
do
are
that
the benefits that you get
for each
with
one.
that. Yeah. I was going to say that when I was working freelance design, the company that I was working for, no matter which, you would get placed in different jobs. So, you know, comparatively, you'd be at Marvel for 2 months, and then you'd be at DC for 10. But the company, the temp agency itself, once you were with them for a specific amount of time, they provided your health care, which I think if there's a union and you're paying dues to this union, then perhaps that would be the way to handle it. Or, you know, there's some kind of pay that's part and parcel of DC paying to the union to provide all of the different comic book industry with those benefits. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. But we're going to have to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Fantastic Forum.
Hi, it's another edition of the Fantastic Four mailbag. Today's letter comes from Mr. Timothy Moore, and this one is for Devon Sanders. After all these years, when they thought TT was dead, laughing out loud. Thanks, Timothy L. Moore. Well, I don't really understand it, but I'm assuming that Devon does. Timothy, thanks for watching, and tell all your friends. We'll see you again on another episode of Fantastic Forum. By the way, if you do have any letters, you can send them to us at producer@dcfantasticforum.com. Now, I understand you started writing the Legion of Superheroes when you were 13 years old? Is this true?
Yes, it is true. Yeah, I didn't know what a script looked like, so I actually sketched out the panels and wrote in the dialogue, and I created a story and sent it in to the editor, and he liked it. And he made me write a couple more, and then he called me up and said, I want to buy these 3. And would you write me a Supergirl story? And so that was my first commission, was a Supergirl story. But they bought everything I ever wrote. And after that, I became a regular writer. I did the Legion pretty much every month. And occasionally Superman, World's Finest, Jimmy Olsen, you know, all the Superman books.
you are somebody who, in my mind, is uniquely qualified to comment on what's going on with comics today, particularly in terms of creators and creators' rights. Now, I know at one time, things, for artists and writers were a lot rougher. Not to say that they're, smooth sailing now, but, were a lot rougher. I mean, artists couldn't even get their pages back and things of this nature. How was it that some of these changes occurred to where, things sort of improved for the creators?
Well, it was a group effort. I mean, one of the first things that happened was, I think around the same time, Roy Thomas at Marvel instituted a program where artwork would be returned to artists, but only from that point forward. In other words, the old artwork still stayed in the vault. And DC had a similar policy around the same time. But mostly back when I started at Marvel in 1978, it was all work for hire. You got paid a page rate. That's all you got. You had no rights, no benefits, no nothing. You turned your pages in, you got your check, that's it. And the checks were pretty small. And so when I took the job, I took it on the condition that I could change that. I had a discussion with the president of the company, and I said that we're not going to survive unless we change things. And he didn't think we were going to survive anyway. He wanted to get out of the comics business altogether and get into animation and children's books and things like that. And his only, he said, do whatever you want, but try not to cost me too much money, So I tried to make everything I did self-liquidating. I came up with a royalty program, and I convinced the board of directors at Cadence Industries that we would sell enough more copies so that the $2 million we paid out in royalties would, we'd cover that. That was a tough sell. But anyway, I mean, so one by one I instituted policies. First was a bonus for people who stayed on the book for more than 3 issues. Second was I changed the artwork return so that all the artwork went to the artists. And then I got the royalty program. Then an incentive for creating characters, and which included you forever thereafter own 20% of that character. And an incentive for launching a new title. You got a 1% override on a title if you created it, even if you didn't have anything to do with it anymore. Like John Byrne always got a royalty on Alpha Flight, no matter who was doing it. So, I mean, that kind of thing. And try to make it better. I figured if it's work for hire, and I can't change that, they won't let me, let's make it enlightened work for hire. Let's make these guys, and then what that did was that brought in top drawer creators. All of a sudden, guys weren't leaving anymore, and guys were coming back. Steve Englehart came back, Jim Starlin came back. We had Walt, we had Chris Claremont, we had Bill Sienkiewicz, Michael Golden. All of a sudden, all these big talents are showing up and sticking around, and they're making a living, and making a good living. I remember one year Chris Claremont bought his mother an airplane for Christmas. It's like, well, he's doing the X-Men, I mean, he was doing all right. But anyway, the thing is, it just got to be better. And then the next step was to have a section of our publishing that was creator-owned. So we established Epic Comics, all creator-owned, and graphic novels, and we published those on the same terms that regular book publishing companies publish books. The author owns it. Now, the author doesn't have the right to own Spider-Man, but if he created the book, it's his book. And paid good royalties and stuff like that. So we really changed it all around. And like I said, it was a group effort. At the same time we're doing this, well, DC saw we're doing it, so they're trying to top us, and we're trying to top them. And then the other companies out there, Dark Horse and Pacific Comics, they all came up with plans, and it just changed the whole landscape for the industry. It was about time, and so things got better. Now, I think, the sales of the industry have gone down somewhat. Fewer creators are getting paid the royalties and incentives. It's not quite as bad as the page rate days, but, I think that this industry needs some revolution. It needs to, something to make it a creative spark, and maybe a change in distribution to get it, rolling again. And then we need to become even more enlightened in the way we deal with creators.
Atlas Comics is worth remembering if only because the company was a pioneer in the area of creators' rights. They were able to employ some of the top talent in comics who enjoyed such myriad benefits as keeping their original art and shared ownership. It didn't last long. Fall of 1974 to spring 1975. I myself recall picking up and enjoying the very interesting and exciting exploits of the likes of characters such as Iron Jaw, Tiger Man, and the Scorpion. But Atlas published more titles than that. There was also the Cougar, Blazing Battle Tanks featuring Sergeant Hawk, the Brute, Demon Hunter, the Destructor, Fright featuring the son of Dracula, just to name a few. But there were more, and the creators who worked on them were some of the giants, like Wally Wood, Alex Toth, Neil Adams, Jim Steranko, and many more. But ultimately, the sum of the 10-month life of Atlas was only 65 color comics, 6 black and white comic magazines, and 5 text periodicals. But just the existence of Atlas caused ripples throughout the comic industry, the effects of which are still felt today. Atlas Comics, gone, but not forgotten.
Welcome back to Fantastic Forum. I really wish you could see what happens in these breaks.
It's all
I wish you
dancing.
could hear it. There's a lot of dancing. There's a lot of frugging. It's just not even like, it's not even funny.
And I can fly.
Scooby-Doo, we all run through doors.
And there's the music.
And back to unionization in comics. So, we were talking about earlier about unionization in comics, how it could work and such like that. Now, here's the deal. We all, and we spoke about this before, we heard about the horror stories with Jack Kirby. We heard about Bill Finger. We've heard about all these other things. Now, if there was such a thing in, like, let's say 1960, when Kirby was creating some of his greatest stuff, do you think that we probably would have gotten an X-Men out of Jack Kirby? If he knew that, like, you know, hey, well, you know, I have to produce X amount of work, I could pull it back, whatever. Would we have gotten Spider-Man? Would we have gotten all these other things that he had a hand in?
I think we would have gotten them, but he would have retained more of the rights. Because I think a union can kind of set what rights the creator of a comic book has. So I don't think his creativity would have been changed as much as maybe how much he got paid in the end.
Well, how much he owned.
And how much he owned, yeah.
Right.
Whether he would be George Lucas or the guy who made the Nike switch.
That's
Yeah,
true.
and, when you're starving, like when you're worried
You're
about
hungry.
things,
Yeah.
right? You know, like
You're passionate
look
about
at
stuff.
Transmetropolitan, like
Yeah.
you know, like Warren Ellis. You know,
Yeah.
he wanted something there, and so and you look at his stuff now, and it's not as good because he's got all this money and stuff. But back then, when he was hungry, so like when, as I said, I want people guaranteed health care. I want,
Right.
but we have creator owned now, and like I don't think that's a step in the right direction. You know,
Right.
like I would love to have seen a creator's own things back then. As not, I mean, yes, if you had a union, maybe you'd get things, maybe you wouldn't. I think a union might affect. You know, what if we have a writer's strike of the let's say in the 80s, you know, Chris Claremont decides to lead everyone on a strike, and suddenly we don't have those things anymore.
That would make John Brooks very happy.
a lot of people very
I think he might be offset dancing.
Well, I mean, I think to touch on what Devon was saying, you have people like Kirby who have these really, you know, amazing work ethics. Who, you know, that's how they were raised. You know, you work hard, you get paid. And now we live in a world where comics. When I had somebody come in the store the other day and was amazed that Blackest Night 2 is out. They're like, "What, is it ship early?" It's like, no, it's on time. And that's the norm now. When a comic comes out on time, people are surprised. And you know, as I would hope that if they were to unionize, that would be something. That would be something that protects the customer and the corporation. Okay, you're in the union, which means you have to get this amount of work done, or you're out. Like, you know, it's standardized.
But that'd be so much more difficult to get rid of someone when they're in a union.
Exactly.
Like, think about people who are like, well, I'm on the union, and they say only 12 hours a day, so I'm going to kick back and not do it. There are no all-nighters for me.
Right.
Like,
Or
if
there's
you-
double time.
Right. But, I mean, and so then you'd have someone to say like, well, you know what, some artists, you know, you're not producing, so we're going to lay you off this book. But then if you have a union involved, then the union rep gets there, and then like they would. So I think it would make it a lot harder to get rid of someone who's bad off of a book.
Yeah, but they don't get rid of the bad ones now.
It's true.
So it's not like,
Well, that's, I mean, and that's the thing I'm worried about. That's like the one, I mean, I'm coming from a really ignorant perspective as far as unions are concerned, but if you're guaranteed a job, it's a lot easier to get lazy, and it's a lot easier to relax, and you already have a lot of people in the industry who are just like, I'll get to it. And that's, and that's a shame.
Number 2 still hasn't shipped.
Yeah, it's, I mean, think of it this way. I think the sad fact is unions are good for employees, but they'd probably be bad for art. You know, you'd get a lot of people who are a little more lackadaisical, a little more relaxed, who weren't as hungry as your Jack Kirby's, your Steve Ditko's, and you're like, I need to work.
Right.
You know, and I need to be doing my best to get work.
Right.
I think it kind of encourages a little more ease of use as far as like,
comic books needs a Siberia. You know, like there was a certain time in basketball where if you were really acting up, they'd send you to Golden State.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my
Sorry,
God, I'm a
everyone has to go
Clipper.
play for the Detroit Lions.
That's what comic books need. It's like, oh, you don't want to draw Spider-Man? Okay.
I guess you're going to be drawing Archie for a little while. Have fun with that. Stay on model.
No, but see, here's the thing. Now, with like the whole unionization of comics, this thing that we've been talking about, and I did kind of say, okay, would we still be getting these Spider-Man? But now, going freelance, doing your own thing, it's not so much about doing your own thing. Now, when you have creator-owned, it almost seems like it's more an audition to work for a corporation now, where it's like Bendis, Brian Michael Bendis, yeah, he toiled away for like 10 years, but then he does Ultimate Spider-Man, and now he's like the ultimate Marvel pitch guy.
Yeah.
You know? So, go ahead.
I think it works 2 ways. I think on one end it is what you said, where you kind of put yourself out there. It's almost like creating a portfolio that they can then judge if you can tell a solid story or if you can produce great sequential art. So I think that's one side. And I think another side is about control. So I think there's 2 schools of thought there where they don't want to deal with all of the rigmarole. And if I'm going to have to pay for my own insurance, I might as well be getting a bigger cut. You know, I think a lot of writers and artists, it's about controlling more of their rights, and also about getting a larger cut of the sales.
And see, a union could also affect, though, like if you standardize wages, there's a good chance once you promise 401k and stuff, a union could actually lead to less money per page. Like, it's the difference when you go, when you're like a contract employee and then you go into like full-time work. Contract employees make more because they don't care about you. So the moment you have a union and set all this stuff that's like saying, here's how you're going to be, there's a chance that the artist or the writer isn't going to make as much money. Or if they do make as much money, and that'd be my concern, is suddenly we have all these things, well, we got to pay for everything. I'd be worried about it coming back onto the reader. Like, books are $3.99 as it is. Suddenly I have to pay for someone's health care, which is great. But
It's, again,
like, I'd be worried about a $5.99 book because of Scott McDaniel's toothache.
I mean, and
like,
again, I
that's
think it comes back to what I
Novocaine.
said. It's good for employees, it's good for creators, but it's bad for readers, and that sucks. You know, I don't want to have, Brian Hitch as a slave in my basement, but at the same time, he's going to be churning out good books.
But you're not going to get if you get a $5.99 book, then comics will die further.
It's
There's
true.
only so much but you are right. I think as a freelancer, you can negotiate your own rates, and I might negotiate a different rate from what Devon negotiates. But when it's standardized, then it's like, damn it, I used to get $55. Now I'm getting
And I totally hear
$35.
you, but once upon a time I remember spending $5 on 10 comics and thinking that was way too much money.
Well.
And on that note, we'll be right back with Fantastic Forum.
Here's Ulysses Campbell, and we're at Alliance Comics in Silver Spring. We're just all over the map here for Free Comic Book Day. It's a little bit quieter here, and in fact, the store is just about to close, but we made it in at the last minute to talk to our friends at Alliance Comics in Silver Spring. Let's see what they have to say. All right, and here we are at Alliance Comics in Silver Spring, and I'm here with
Derek Scarzella.
and
Nick Henderson.
all right. So I mean, I know I kind of came in right under the wire here, fellas,
Yes,
but
you did. About to close.
well, thank God. Appreciate you letting me in. But
Always.
hey, but just need to find out, how was it today? I mean, every place that we've been, every place I've had my on-the-scene reporters today, Free Comic Book Day has just been off the chain. You've had all kinds of people who've been in, some of them first-timers, some of them old-timers, young fans, old fans, and all there because, they're giving stuff away free, I mean, which is great. So,
Yeah, that's the best.
yeah. So how'd it work out for Alliance Comics today?
Well, today was absolutely awesome. All sorts of people came in, young, old. The best part is the kids, seeing them run around grabbing stuff and bugging their parents for money. But it was great. The store was packed. We had some video games being played with the Street Fighter tournament downstairs. We had trivia. Somebody walked out of here with a Darth Vader helmet, which is always fun for the fans. So yeah, it was a tremendous amount of fun.
How would you rate today for Alliance Comics?
You know what? It ranks up there as one of probably the best free comic book days of all time,
Now, this has been going on for about 8 years now, isn't that right?
at least.
Okay. Well, did you get anything free?
Actually, I did not. Strangely enough, I usually get charged on free comic book day. I don't know how that works out.
Well, that's just not right.
It isn't. Everything isn't free, but I guess what happens on free comic book day is that it gets people interested in the art form of comic books where normally they would not be. So they come in, and the free comic books are like a gateway drug for the not-so-free comic books, which are equally great.
Geez, we're going to have to get, I mean, you guys are a great interview. We're going to have you guys as guests on the show.
Please.
Yeah. But here we are, your Free Comic Book Day, Alliance Comics. Remember, support the industry. I know it's too late for you to get out, but look for the next one, and it'll be like nothing you've ever experienced. I guarantee it.
And welcome back to Fantastic Forum. Just want to thank our guests, Ben Hatton to my right, James Rambo to my other right, and Shireen to my way right, or something like that. Long story short, thanks for watching. Bye.